Shakumako, everyone. Welcome to this week's Iraq briefing, where we break down some of the most important developments shaping Iraq today. I'm Erik Gustafson.
And I'm Omar Dawi.
For today's briefing, we are talking about the clash of courts in Iraq, a closer look at the potential legal and political crisis sparked by Iraq's Supreme Court, federal court. The court has just suspended 3 controversial laws that Parliament passed 3 weeks ago. These include amendments to the Personal Status Law number 188 of 1959, the General Amnesty Law number 27 of 2016, and a law that returns land confiscated by the Ba'ath Party regime. We'll unpack how this suspension came about, who's pushing back, and the implications for all of those affected in Iraq. So let's dive in. So Omar, can you tell us what did the court exactly say and why did it take this action?
There were a lot of objections that were made after Parliament passed these laws by several lawmakers who complained that the Speaker of Parliament violated the parliamentary bylaws during that vote. First, they argued that the 3 bills were voted on basically they were passed in a single vote instead of individually. And they also argued that there was lack of quorum, actually, that after the vote was initiated, a lot of lawmakers walked out of the room, and that basically deprived the session of required quorum to proceed. So these lawmakers filed lawsuits with the federal Supreme Court saying that this parliamentary session should be nullified because it was not conducted in accordance with the law. And the federal Supreme Court issued an injunction saying these 3 laws will be suspended until the court decides the fate of these 3 bills after looking into the facts and the circumstances of the cases filed by the lawmakers. So it's a temporary suspension meant to give the court time to study the cases and meanwhile prevent irreparable harm that could arise from allowing the laws to be implemented.
Can I ask just a clarifying question? So if I understand correctly, they're not looking so much as whether procedure was violated and therefore it has to come to a vote again, but instead they're looking at each individual law and whether or not it's constitutional and valid.
That's a good question. The language in the court order was a little ambiguous. It did mention that the court would be investigating the constitutionality of these laws. However, the statements to the press made by the lawmakers who actually filed the lawsuits focused more on the procedural violations that took place during the vote. So it's not clear if it was just sloppy writing or that the cases actually were addressing not just the procedural legality or correctness of the session, but also the constitutionality of the substance of the laws in question.
Okay. So as I understand, and from following your weekly reports, Hisham, these laws took intense negotiations over a long period of time. And it included some of the major ruling political parties of Iraq, among the Sunni Arabs, among the Shia, the coordinating framework, among Kurdish parties. What kind of reaction has this court decision had with all of those parties?
Well, there were 2 important reactions or groups of reactions that immediately emerged. The most vociferous one came from the Sunni political parties because of their investment in the General Amnesty Law. They were the loudest in condemning the court's decision, in denouncing the court's decision as an exercise in overreach, that the court basically overstepped and intervened in the work of the legislative branch of government. At the same time, 4 provincial governments in Nineveh, Anbar, Kirkuk, and Salahuddin also objected to the court's decision, and they declared that they will shut down their offices for 3 days in protest. Interesting enough, we didn't see much reactions from the other two blocs, the Coordination Framework and the Kurdish political parties who had backed the other two bills. They kind of are in a waning mode, I think, while letting the Sunni blocs kind of go out on a limb. More important is perhaps what we saw in terms of the reaction from the Supreme Judicial Council, which has the authority to regulate and has administrative powers over the judicial branch. So the head of the Supreme Judicial Council, Faiq Zaidan, as head of the Court of Cassation, said that this decision was incorrect because the court cannot suspend laws that have not yet been published in the official gazette. And he also argued that this is not a final and binding decision because of its nature as a temporary injunction. This was echoed this morning by Zaidan's deputy in the Court of Cassation. The interesting thing, though, is that the Court of Cassation, if that's the source of this critique, actually does not have power to rule into decisions made by the federal Supreme Court. The Court of Cassation only has power over civil and criminal lower courts of the country. So there is a bit of a uncertainty about who has the authority to dispute a federal Supreme Court order, and whether anyone does have that power. And there is an effort, I think, to find an exit ramp from this crisis that's undermining the position of the judiciary as a whole.
It sounds like it. I mean, if you have, for example, if this were in the United States and the Supreme Court comes forward with a decision, the idea that a lower court can then somehow challenge that decision seems quite remarkable.
Right. It seems backwards. Yeah, it seems like it shouldn't happen.
Okay, so what happens now?
Well, like I said earlier, there seems to be an effort to find an exit ramp from this embarrassing crisis. So the federal Supreme Court issued a statement today saying that they will be making decisions into the cases filed by the lawmakers by March 11. And I think by setting a certain deadline to this situation, they're saying, okay, let's just give us that month that we need. We'll decide it, and let's call this crisis off. In the meantime, that's another side of this controversy, is that the Supreme Judicial Council actually instructed the criminal courts in Iraq to ignore the federal Supreme Court's decision and to go ahead and start implementing the provisions of the amended amnesty law. So that's adding to the confusion and the uncertainty about who's really in charge here, who is the highest judicial authority in the country.
Okay, so any silver lining in this?
Well, if there's any silver lining, it's potential temporary, is that the court's injunction suspends the implementation of the amended personal status law, which, as we know, has raised a lot of strong objections from rights defenders, from women rights defenders, because of the risks that these amendments include for human rights in the country.
And for more on that very topic, please check out our last episode, which we'll include right up there, which gives you more of a deeper dive on the personal status law and why so many people are raising legitimate objections to that. So that's it for this episode of your Iraq briefing. For more news and analysis, please visit us at enablingpeace.org. And if you value this content, please like and subscribe to our channel. I also want to let you know that we are closely following the shutdown of USAID, the freeze on foreign assistance, how that impacts EPIC as an organization and our mission and Iraq. And we'll be doing more of an episode discussing that very issue soon. Until then, take a look at our resource in the description below. So until next time, maslama.